We are now on to lesson 23, which is going to cover the subjunctive mood. And I feel like we're kind of on a downhill slope here. You've learned kind of the bulk of the Greek language here, and the rest of the lessons I think they're getting easier. You're on a downhill into more of the just irregular things, and not as central of things. That is, subjunctive here is probably the hardest chapter remaining. So this video might be a little longer as we go through this, but I hope you don't find it too terribly hard. So just as an overview of where we have been, so we have covered all of the tenses: present, future, imperfect, aorist, perfect, pluperfect. Those should all sound familiar and you should know what those mean. We have covered all of the voices: active, middle, and passive. Those should all be familiar. You should know what they mean. And we have only covered the indicative mood. And so now, basically, the chapters are going to start hitting each of these moods for a bit here. And so we're going to do the subjunctive. And I like to think of the moods as indicative is stating a fact. And then the further you kind of go down the moods here, the less factual they become and the more probable they become. So indicative is stating a fact. I ate a sandwich. Imperative is trying to create reality. Eat the sandwich, right? The imperative tells you that I haven't eaten the sandwich, but the imperative is trying to make me eat the sandwich. So it's trying to make reality happen. Subjunctive, a way to translate it is adding might. So I might eat the sandwich. Or often the subjunctive is used in an imperative, a first person imperative. So we might say like, let us eat the sandwich, or something like that. And so it can have a similar function to the imperative, but it can also have a more probable, like, I don't know if I'll eat the sandwich, but I might. And then the last one here is optative, which we might say may. These are the least common in Greek, in biblical Greek at least. It was more common in classical Greek, but in biblical Greek, it's basically only in prayers. So, like, may the Lord bless us, may God be faithful and hear our prayer. Whenever you have kind of that, or often at the beginning of epistles, like, blessed be the God and Father, sometimes there'll be an optative inserted in there. But they're more like wishes. They're not imperatives or indicative stating a fact. So that's an overview of mood. That's where we will be going in the future here. But for this lesson, we're just looking at the subjunctive. So turning back to our lesson here. So we talked about what the subjunctive is. So here, the subjunctive conveys doubt, expectation, volition, intention, desire, and the like. We'll look at more specifics of that. But okay, in terms of the form, the good thing about subjunctives is you don't have to learn any new endings. What you need to know is that the endings, the connecting vowel lengthens, and that's it. All the endings should be familiar. So you can just look through here. So rather than you would expect an omicron here, luomai, here we just have an omega. Or like here, you would expect an epsilon, but we have an eta. So the connecting vowel lengthens in the subjunctive. So that is how you can pick it out. And then the other thing, there's only the present and the aorist forms of the subjunctive that you need to learn. And the aorist, a distinguishing fact here, is that there's no augment. Why? Because we're no longer in the indicative. And so outside of the indicative, we don't have tense or time, or we only have aspect. So just like participles don't have the augment, neither do subjunctives. So the aorist subjunctive doesn't have the augment. And just in your own, like, as you translate the subjunctive, it's often hard to bring out the nuance of a present or an aorist. The difference between the present and the aorist subjunctive. So you might be translating the present and the aorist in much in the same way. It's similar to like imperatives we translate in much in the same, or infinitives. We've seen a few infinitives. We've translated those much in the same. It's hard sometimes to bring out a difference in aspect, and even to bring it out is almost over translating. So that's just a little, okay. So the main thing is the aorist doesn't have the augment, but you'll see the sigma and you'll see the lengthened connecting vowel still. So the sigma is going to be the big distinguishing between the present and the aorist. But no new forms, thankfully. The endings should all be familiar. 164 talks about the uses of the aorist. And the main ones, the two that I really think you need to learn is the first one here. This is the hortatory subjunctive. This is what I was talking about as the first person imperative. Let us speak. Let us go. So it's like, it's commanding ourselves to go do something. So you don't use the imperative in Greek, but you use the subjunctive, the first person plural subjunctive to do this, and it's called a hortatory subjunctive. You translate it with a let us. The other one that you should really get familiar with is the purpose. And so these are sometimes called hina clauses because of this conjunction here, hina, which means in order that. So we are going to the temple in order that we might see these signs. This is super, super common in biblical Greek. And these are probably the most common that you'll see. So the first one here, the hortatory, and number 4, the purpose. These other ones are important. They are fairly common in Greek. So the first one, or I guess the second one, number 2 is the deliberative subjunctive. Think you're deliberating in your head whether you should or shouldn't do something. So you can see the examples there. Shall we take bread from our children and eat it? You can feel that we're questioning and deliberating within ourselves. Number 3 is an emphatic negation. So me, and then plus a subjunctive will be a negation but emphatic. You will never say bad things about my mother. So adding like surely not or never are ways to translate this emphatic negation. And then number 5 here, this is pretty common. It's a normal condition, if then, we've seen this with the a as meaning if you add an on right here, sometimes you'll just see on its own in a sentence. And this on can contract with some particles. So a is one of those, and it will look like aeon, like this. And what the on does is it makes something more indefinite. So we've seen this somewhat with like tis. If I say anthropos tis ergetai, we translate that as like a certain person goes. And that's kind of what on does, is we're not talking about a specific person. We're talking indefinitely. Like if there should be a person that happened to do something, so here these conditions express what can be expected to occur under certain circumstances. That is, conditions that are not yet actualized, but are likely. So here it's some possible future thing that might happen. They they do not pertain to a specific stated as actual circumstances. So you can see that kind of like general, or here it says proverbial quality. But this on, you can see it. I mean, it's one of your vocab words. If we just go back to vocabulary here for a second, you can see on, a particle that adds contingency, may add a sense of ever. Yeah, that's a good. So like where a, you say, if I do this, then this happens. You can almost translate in your head aeon as, if ever it would be that something would happen, then it would happen. It makes it more contingent or indefinite. You can see it here, like hote, and then you add the on, and here, so rather than just when, adding the on makes it whenever. So here you have when, and here you have whenever. So this on, whenever you see on, you should be waiting for a subjunctive, looking for a subjunctive, whether it's standing on its own or whether it's contracted with a particle. Okay, so those are the uses of the subjunctive. And then 165 is just noting that there's no augment because there's no time in the subjunctive because we're not in the indicative. And therefore, we need to think of aspect or kind of action rather than time of action. 166 gives the a-me forms, which are always a little irregular for you to see, and then it goes into exercises. So, okay, that's the subjunctive.